Wake TF up. Welcome to the Sovereign Signal, the channel of sovereign fire. Education. The Captured Mind, Part 1. Debt Factories. The schoolroom promises versus the ledger reality. They told you a story at school, and they told your parents, and they told your grandparents. It was a neat ladder painted in bright colors. Study hard, get the grades, go to university, secure a stable job, buy a house, own a car, take holidays, retire with a pension. The script was recited by teachers, guidance counselors, glossy prospectuses, and government campaigns. It felt safe because it matched what your grandparents saw, but only because the trap hadn't closed yet. Generation by generation, the promises stayed the same, while the mechanics underneath were swapped for debt, precarity, and compliance. Here's the ledger, stripped of the glitter. Grandparent promise. Education is a public good. Work hard, and the state backs you. Parent promise. Education opens doors. A small loan is an investment. Child promise. Education is freedom. Debt is normal. Flexibility is the future. Reality. Freedom turned into payments and passwords. The doors are paywalled. Flexibility means insecurity. The UK fee ratchet and the global normalization of debt. Tuition introduction. Fees arrived in the UK in 1998. The line sold to parents was modest contribution, a foot in the door. Escalation. £3,000 in the mid-2000s, then £9,000 from 2012. Maintenance grants were abolished in England in 2016 and replaced with maintenance loans, expanding debt to cover basic survival. Interest mechanics. Loans accrue interest, often tied to RPI, meaning balances grow while graduates earn entry-level wages. The psychological trick is repay via payroll, turning a debt chain into a silent tax. Write-off theater. Ministers reassure with write-off after decades. Translation. Most will pay for a lifetime, and a write-off is admission the model failed. Global analogs. U.S. Public university used to be affordable. Now debt exceeds $1 trillion, and borrowers carry balances into middle age. Australia. HEC-ELP welded repayments to tax. Income contingent softened the sale, but the principle is the same. Education becomes a revenue stream. Canada EU variance. Fees and living costs rose. Loans filled the gap. International student revenues cross-subsidized budgets, shifting universities from public service to competition engines. Venom truth. Access was rewritten as access to debt. The university remained open. The exits were narrowed by compounding interest and wage compression. The silent administrative machine and the rankings casino. Administrative bloat, senior management tiers, and compliance offices multiplied. Salaries grew at the top, while teaching posts became fixed term and adjunct. Every new compliance framework, REF, TEF, NSS, Ofsted metrics in schools, justified another layer of measurement and middle management. Ranking obsession. League tables incented vanity projects, capital spending on glossy buildings, and marketing campaigns. Returns are measured in optics, not learning. Cross-subsidy games. Research prestige and REF scores are fed by international student fees and debt-fueled domestic intake. Teaching becomes a revenue arm for research optics. Venom truth. Universities told you they were meritocracies. Inside, they became optics factories funded by student borrowing. The graduate premium myth versus wage reality. Graduate premium sold. Earn more with a degree. That phrase ignores field differences, regional labor markets, saturation, and credential inflation. Credential inflation. Jobs that once required apprenticeships or training now demand degrees. The signal shifted, not the skill. Employers raised the paper threshold to ration applicants, not improve performance. Wage stagnation. Entry-level wages have not tracked tuition and living cost increases. The premium, shrank or vanished in many fields, but the debt remained. Unpaid internships. Employers externalized training onto students via unpaid or low-paid placements, converting the first years of career into uncompensated labor. Venom truth. A degree became a ticket to join an oversubscribed queue. The premium was shaved off by debt and by employers offloading risk onto graduates. The housing lie. Study now, mortgage later becomes maybe never. Deposit requirements rose. House price to income multiples climbed, and precarious employment contracts failed affordability checks. Student loan drag. Even income contingent repayments reduce disposable income and stress affordability ratios. Banks don't ignore reality, even if marketing does. Boomers versus millennials. Grandparents bought homes on single incomes and saved. Parents faced rising ratios, but could still enter. Children face rent extraction and landlords capturing what would be savings. Venom truth. Get a degree to buy a house was inverted into get a degree, pay a shadow tax. Rent forever. Pensions. From promise to probability, defined benefits shrink. Grandparents retired on DB schemes. Parents saw shifts to DC. Children face contribute or be exposed, with market risk pushed onto individuals. Auto-enrollment optics. Governments celebrated default savings while contributions are thin and markets volatile. Retirement age drift. The finish line moves. A flexible pension is a polite way to say uncertain. Venom truth. The pension in the schoolroom story was replaced by a spreadsheet of assumptions and a risk you carry alone. The modern schoolroom script. Compliance in 9 phrases. Follow the rubric. Creativity downmarked if it misses standardized criteria. Attendance equals success. Training compliance over curiosity. Target grades. Data dashboards replace learning with metrics. Pathways. Controlled choice. Steer into tested subjects, away from critical humanities. Employability skills. Corporate-ready behaviors prioritized over critical thought. Behavior points. Merit defined as quiet obedience. University outreach. Marketing to minors framed as aspiration. Careers week. Employer booth selling culture fit, not questioning. Debt normalization. Loans presented as routine. Grants erased from memory. Venom truth. School primed you to accept contracts without negotiating and debts without outrage. International students and the revenue pivot. Pricing tiers. International fees priced exponentially higher than domestic. Dependence. Universities lean on this revenue to plug deficits, shaping admissions priorities. Research optics. Citations and conference circuits serve ranking games. The teaching mission serves the prestige mission. Venom truth. The institution did not chase truth. It chased scoreboards and sold seats at different prices to keep the lights on. The generational pattern mapped cleanly. Grandparents. Free or minimal fees. Stable jobs. Affordable houses. DB pensions. Holidays possible. Education felt like freedom. Parents. Fees introduced. Loans normalized. Job precarity rising. Housing harder. DC pensions. Fewer holidays. Education felt like a bet. Children. £9,000 fees and rising costs. Debt embedded in life. Gigified jobs. Housing out of reach. Pensions as speculation. Holidays aspirational. Education is a financed compliance program. The promises remained word for word. The mechanisms underneath were replaced piece by piece. That is indoctrination with continuity. A script unchanged to hide a system transformed. The frame they used to sell it. Access. Expanding capacity meant expanding indebtedness. Fairness. You only pay if you earn. Ignored wage compression and housing inflation. Meritocracy. A scoreboard that advantages those who can afford unpaid labor and internships. World class. Rankings mythology to excuse domestic extraction. Venom truth. They changed the plumbing, but kept the wallpaper. You were taught to love the wallpaper. The cut that matters. The captured mind is the one that still repeats the schoolroom lines even as the ledger screams. The antidote is clarity. Treat every promise as a contract and inspect the terms. Demand grants over loans, local training over credential inflation, apprenticeships with wages, civic education with dissent, housing policies that bind prices to incomes, and pension structures that share risk. This is not nostalgia. It is a reassertion of public goods over private rent. Part 2. Indoctrination Architectures. How curricula, exams, and partnerships trained obedience generation by generation. Education didn't just finance compliance. It taught it. The classroom turned into a factory for acceptable thoughts, acceptable questions, and acceptable targets. Elites did not need to censor everything. They needed to shape incentives, so most students would censor themselves. Here's the machinery. Lead architecture, standardized exams, textbook monopolies, corporate partnerships, league tables, research funding criteria, and employability rhetoric. Standardized testing as obedience technology. Exam supremacy. Assessment is the North Star. Teachers calibrate to past papers, marking schemes, and success criteria. Curriculum narrowing. What isn't examined shrinks. Art, music, philosophy, local history, and critical debate become expendable. Risk aversion. Students learn to minimize error, not pursue uncertainty. They perform the rubric rather than interrogate the premise. Venom truth. Exams didn't just measure learning. They redefined it into predictable compliance. Textbook and content monopolies. Narrative control by design. Single vendor dominance. Large publishers control core texts. Updates align with exam boards and government frameworks, not local inquiry. Economic orthodoxy. Intro Econ teaches models abstracted from power and distribution. Reform movements are treated as fringe. History sanitization. Empire framed as modernization. Extraction reframed as development. Dissenters footnoted instead of centered. Venom truth. A narrow set of books set the boundaries of acceptable thought. That is how you domesticate curiosity. Corporate partnerships and employability pipelines. Curricula tuned to industry. Modules co-designed with corporate HR. Case studies drawn from multinational best practices. Careers offices as intake arms. CV clinics and mock interviews become conformity training. Internship black box. Unpaid placements as gatekeeping. Those with financial buffers advance. Those without fall behind. Venom truth. Education taught you to speak brand language and avoid moral language. That was the point. Research funding and prestige economics. Grant capture. Funding flows toward military, surveillance, pharma, and fintech projects with commercial potential. Public interest research sidelined. Community health. Democratic participation. Local ecologies struggle for money and attention. Metric worship. H-index, impact factor, citations. Scientists learn to feed the machine. Teaching and community work are undervalued. Venom truth. The knowledge economy is an obedience economy disguised as metrics. School messaging. 9 obedience implants across decades. Stay in lane. Course paths discourage switching disciplines late. Respect authority. Teacher as technician marks compliance. Dissent framed as disruption. Time equals merit. Attendance over substance. Team fit. Value alignment with organizations prioritized over ethical judgment. Leadership. Resume safe initiatives, not community accountability. Global citizen. Travel brochures, not local responsibility. Smart risk. Only financialized entrepreneurship is celebrated. Data-driven. Quantify everything. Emotions and justice are soft. Failure is fatal. No safe labs for collapse and rebuild, just penalties. Venom truth. Obedience did not feel like obedience because it was graded, not ordered. Generational tightening, mapped in classrooms and lecture halls, 1950s, 1970s. Structure, public funding, broad curricula, slower exams. Promise, civic formation, stable futures. Reality, debt minimal, dissent possible, professions accessible. 1980s, 2000s. Structure, fees introduced. Standardized exams intensified. Corporate ties expand. Promise, global opportunities, efficiency. Reality, debt normal. Critical departments shrink. Internships as unpaid filters. 2000s to 2020s. Structure, full tuition commodification. EdTech datafication. Rankings drive policy. Promise, personalization, flexibility. Reality, surveillance learning, gig careers. Mental health crises underperformance metrics. Venom truth. The script stayed constant so you wouldn't notice the set being rebuilt around you. Indoctrination case motifs you know by feel. Economics 101. Perfect competition and rational agents. Number unions, no monopolies, no class. History unit. Nation's triumphs and selective regrets. No accountability, no reparations. Business module. Shareholder value, ESG is marketing. Ethics outsourced to policy. STEM lab. Tools over implications. Funding directs curiosity. Civics. Voting equals democracy. Protest equals disruption, unless sanitized. Venom truth. You learned methods without meaning. That was deliberate. How captured education polices dissent without bans. Rubric penalty. Dissenting essays get marked down for off-topic. Reference policing. Non-canonical sources dismissed. Lived experience downgraded. Time scarcity. Overloaded timetables kill reading and reflection. Students stick to summaries. Anxiety loops. Perfectionism and fear of failure produce docile behavior. Venom truth. No censor needed when fear and lack of time do the job. Roots that restore sovereignty to minds and futures. Demand grants over loans. Re-establish maintenance grants and reduce fee dependence on debt. Apprenticeships with wages. Real training tied to pay, not unpaid internships. Open curricula. Modular freedoms to switch fields and interrogate power. Local civic labs. Projects anchored in communities with accountability and impact. Critical literacy. Mandatory units on media power, corporate capture, and economic history of debt. Assessment reform. Portfolio, public defense, peer review, reduce single high-stakes exams. Public interest funding. Ring-fence budgets for community research and teaching integrity. Housing linkages. Campus community build schemes to reduce rent extraction and stabilize student life. Transparent career pipelines. Ban unpaid internships. Publish hiring criteria. Measure employer exploitation. Venom truth. Freedom is not a sentiment. It's architecture. Build it, or debt will keep building you. Final lens and signal. They made the rules to a game you didn't know you were playing. In classrooms, they taught the script. At universities, they sold the ticket. In markets, they charged the rent. The promises were kept on paper, while the mechanisms were swapped in practice. That is how you capture minds and futures without a coup. This is education. The captured mind. The pattern is visible. The mask is off. The next move is ours. Wake TF up. This is the sovereign signal. Support the mission. Like, share, subscribe. Wake TF up.